The Unquiet Spirit of Child Sarah. Stephanie Rooney, a petite 24-year-old, had not noticed it before. Her trips to Derry rarely brought her to that part of town. Stephanie hardly noticed them at first because there was so much to please the eye. As Stephanie drew closer to the bags, she realized that the scents that had so delighted her emanated not from potpourri, as she first thought, but from those curious little wooden balls. "I have them all over the place at home." Stephanie picked one up and held it under her nostrils. "I forgot to put the sign up this morning." "In that case I'll take a dozen of the strawberry," said Stephanie, counting them into a tiny wicker basket pro-vide for that purpose. Stephanie considered herself a very lucky woman at that time, on Tuesday, September 16, 2003. Her priorities had shifted since she and Declan had moved into 8 Cedar Close, Dungiven. She thought a bowl of the scented balls would look pretty on the hearth and create a lovely perfumed atmosphere in the living room. It was, after all, the room where she and her husband spent much of their leisure time. She placed them on the living room hearth, stood back, shut her eyes, and reveled in their fragrance. Declan noticed the wonderful scent as soon as he came home. He thought his wife was baking a strawberry pie or making a dessert of some kind, until she explained about her little purchase and brought him into the front room. "I know, I did." She shook her head, scooped up the stray balls, and held them out for Declan to savor. "I'm starving." But how, Stephanie was asking herself, did the scented balls get out of the bowl? Bemused, she replaced the balls and followed Declan into the kitchen. How could they do that? Declan stomped twice with his heel on the kitchen floor. "It's a shallow bowl, light too." Stephanie was thoughtful. Several days passed and Stephanie thought no more about the scented balls. The Rooneys remembered that birthday party with absolute clarity, perhaps because the carefree atmosphere and the good time they had that evening contrasted so sharply with what awaited them on their return home. Declan went upstairs at once, leaving Stephanie to switch off the standard lamp in the living room. But the photographs, the 3 framed photographs, one of Stephanie and Declan, 2 of family members, had been turned to face the wall. "Declan," she cried, backing toward the door. Declan knew that all windows had been firmly secured and doors locked before they left the house. Declan fell asleep almost at once, but Stephanie lay awake for a time. Stephanie felt herself drifting off. She shook Declan awake. "Oh, my God," gasped Stephanie. Declan sprang out of bed. "Where are you going? Where'd you think?" Declan tried to keep the fear out of his voice. "I'm coming with you," said Stephanie. Gingerly Declan turned the key to the living room door. But Declan's newfound optimism was shattered that evening on his return home. The living room seemed in order, the framed photographs were in their customary places on the mantel-piece, as was the traveling clock. Puzzled, he set the time and went to check on the other clocks in the house. Now Declan was filled with disquiet. Of one thing he was certain, he would say nothing about the clocks to Stephanie. He was thinking of time again, and thinking of time caused him to look at his wristwatch, and the clocks. They got back to Cedar Close a little after 6 p.m. Declan need not have worried. Declan recalls that he was lulled into a false sense of security, the house seemed more peaceful than ever. Stephanie dimmed the lights in the living room and they sprawled, as they always did, on the big couch. But no sooner had Declan poured himself a beer than they heard a loud, sharp report on the floor directly behind them, followed by the sound a rolling marble makes. Stephanie was startled, though still not persuaded that something unnatural was taking place in her home. "I thought right away that Declan was messing around." "We're getting out of here," Declan announced. They left immediately and again spent the night at the home of Declan's mother. "The house," Stephanie says, "was telling us something." At other times, they had, according to Stephanie, a mind of their own. They would spring out of the ceramic bowl of their own volition, form patterns, hide in different parts of the house, then reappear later in the middle of the living room floor. Other times one would roll after Declan as he walked down the hall to the kitchen. Declan turned to his father for advice. In the case of the Rooney house, there were none. "We ought to try and catch your poltergeist in the act," Declan's father said. The Rooneys would hear the bedroom doors being opened and shut again, bathroom faucets would turn themselves on. The house in Cedar Close, the dream home they had sunk all their savings in, was becoming a liability. "When this sort of thing happens to you," Declan says, "the last thing you want to do is let on to the neighbors." The Rooneys faced a choice. They could enlist the help of parapsychologists, what Declan deprecatingly called Ghostbusters, or they could turn to religion. Write it out, learn it, and place a copy in every room in the house. Stephanie was examining the text of the prayer with a mixture of gratitude and unease. "Haven't played it for a while, Father," said Declan, trying to keep calm. "I don't think he really believed us," Stephanie said, when the priest had left. "Pity something didn't happen when he was here." "Oh, my God." Declan heard a cup shattering on the pine floor. He turned from the window, to find Stephanie staring at the hearth. Declan's first impulse was to appeal to Father O'Malley. Stephanie was of two minds. He is not surprised by this increase and contends that the turning away from God by the masses in Western society has made natural man vulnerable to attacks by spiritual forces. He is careful to keep an open mind whenever a fresh instance of paranormal manifestation is presented to him. As Declan Rooney related his catalogue of strange events taking place in the house in Dungiven, the canon's first thought was child's play. The activities, the scented balls being bounced around the floor, the Scrabble letters arranging themselves into words, all struck him as being the pranks of a mischievous, spirit child. His puzzlement grew after he had spoken at length to Declan and Stephanie. "I was more interested in that sinister aspect, the reversed photographs." Nevertheless, he listened to a tape recording of the balls being tossed about the room and was shown photographs of them arranged in various patterns. He celebrated what he recalls was a beautiful Eucharist, one throughout which the Lord was verily and powerfully present. The canon left the house in Cedar Close, satisfied with a mission well accomplished. Indeed, in the weeks that followed, he learned through regular contact with Declan that his home was peaceful once more. As the weeks passed without incident, and weeks turned to months, they felt tremendously grateful for the peace the canon had restored to their home. Stephanie copied it out several times, as the priest instructed, and placed a copy in each room of the house. Then a change occurred, one that, in Declan's words, ratcheted things up a notch. Josie and Noel Brady live at 10 Cedar Close, the property adjoining the Rooneys. She found Declan and Stephanie a pleasant young couple but rarely saw them, except on weekends or when they had time off work. Josie immediately thought that Declan was doing some home improvement. It was a still, mild day, and Cedar Close appeared to be otherwise deserted when she pushed open the gate to the Rooney house. A few hours later, Declan and Stephanie pulled into their driveway. "I know how he feels," said Declan, locking his car. "God, he was a tight old, yes, Declan." Stephanie was in no mood to listen to a story that she had heard countless times before. "Look, no letters. Who was it then? The ghost? Please, Declan." From the time their troubles began, the couple had made a habit of locking all the doors before leaving for work. At the same moment that Stephanie was putting her key in the bedroom door, Declan was unlocking the door to the kitchen. Downstairs, Declan was struggling to come to terms with the burning candle and the Bible. With quivering hands, Stephanie rearranged her effects and quietly closed each drawer. Meanwhile, Declan picked up the Bible. Declan was in the habit of stopping for a beer on his way home most Fridays. If you like this video, please help me by hitting the like button, subscribe to the channel and turn on the notification bell, so you will not miss any new videos like this. "Hey, Rooney," he said with a smirk, "did that ghost of yours ever come back?" Thinking back on it now and still puzzling over the strange tableau on the floor of his kitchen, Declan was asking himself if the unsavory burn might not have something to do with it. "What's that smell?" Stephanie asked, coming downstairs. Smell? Declan had not reckoned on the smell. The Rooneys closed the door on Mr. Brady's retreating back and looked at each other in dismay. "My God, Declan, it's coming back." Stephanie was devastated, close to tears. In her confusion and anger, she did not know what she dreaded more, the return of the manifestations or the whole street knowing about them, and suspecting it was somehow the Rooneys' fault, that they had done something to invite this thing into their home. Declan tried to console her. Declan did not doubt that Byrne could gain access to his house via the rear entrance. The man was forever bragging that he could pick a lock faster than any burglar and leave no trace. It was a crazy idea, but Declan thought Byrne was a little crazy. "Wouldn't trust him as far as I could throw him." This much Declan said to Stephanie. Wooden balls bouncing about the room were one thing, lighted candles and open Bibles in the kitchen were something else again. Ghosts and poltergeists, in Declan's book, did not do such things, people did. He was asking himself if he or Stephanie had made an enemy of someone without being aware of it. He was asking himself if somebody was trying to frighten them into leaving the house in Cedar Close. He made sure to lock the patio doors, and took the added precaution of locking the kitchen door as well. While Declan was engaged downstairs, Stephanie was kneeling at her bedside, praying fervently to Michael the Archangel for protection. Stephanie sensed that a voice, a child's voice, had spoken to her, though she heard nothing further. She heard Declan breathing lightly in his sleep and had no wish to rouse him. She and Declan had discussed it from time to time. Like so many young women, Stephanie hoped that her first child would be a girl. Stephanie felt what could only be a small hand squeeze her upper arm. Gone was Stephanie's fear, tenderness for the child had replaced it. Stephanie waited with a hand on her heart. Declan stirred in his sleep. Sa-ra. It was the voice of a little girl, a half-whisper of a voice that filled Stephanie with sadness and poignancy. When Declan pushed open the door, the sun was bathing the kitchen in bright light. Stephanie said nothing. Declan's plan had worked, perhaps too well. God! Stephanie had found her voice at last. Declan experienced a terrible sense of dread. When Canon Landrum encounters a particularly difficult case, as the Rooney case was proving to be, he calls on the help of a close friend of many years' standing. Florence accompanied the Canon and his wife on their second visit to the Rooney home. Stephanie appeared to have lost weight, and she and her husband looked tired and drawn. Present also at the house were Declan's parents. The group settled down in the living room and, over tea, the visitors listened as Declan and Stephanie told of the catalogue of manifestations that had plagued their home. In fact, only one room had an open fire, the room they were seated in. She could hear Declan's voice receding, as if someone was turning down the volume on a radio. It had entered through the open doorway of the living room. It was the first time he had witnessed an incident of this nature in the Rooney home. After the service, the Canon went from room to room, cleansing the house in the name of the Lord. The first occurred as the Canon's car approached the Rooney home. Yet the interesting part of her vision concerned the Rooney house itself. Canon Landrum had suspected it in the first instance. Now they felt certain that the playful activity was the work of the mysterious spirit child. Declan could rule out Scotty Byrne or a mischievous neighbor. Declan was of two minds about this. But on October 10, 2004, 5 months after Canon Landrum's second visit and a full 14 months after the Rooney's problems began, the clan made a breakthrough. Declan experienced a tremendous sense of relief on unearthing this information. He hurried home in high excitement and related the good news to Stephanie. Stephanie went to Father O'Malley and arranged for a mass to be said for the little girls. Nevertheless, Stephanie was reluctant to remove those copies of the prayer she had placed in every room. One thing remained to be investigated. Declan still had not satisfied his natural curiosity with regard to the fireplace that Florence had seen in her vision. It must mean something, he said to Stephanie. Why would Florence Miller see a fireplace? Declan had a hunch that the answer lay on his property. Declan asked around. This gave Declan more pause for thought. When I heard about your troubles, I wasn't surprised at all. Declan was not in the least superstitious, he had never believed in ghosts. No, Declan decided, selling was out of the question. If Canon Landrum was to be believed, then the problem of the spirit child could be solved through prayer and faith. Declan's only consolation lay in the fact that he had not been responsible for disturbing it in the first place. Declan shared his concerns with Stephanie. Stephanie is not so sure. Her own feeling is that Declan's inquiries had somehow opened a door on some secret or other, and in so doing had left both of them vulnerable to aggression shown from the other side. Whatever the cause or motivation, that night Declan was physically attacked. When this occurs in cases of paranormal activity, when consecrated, protective objects come under attack, one must face the possibility that evil forces are at work. But perhaps the most startlingly malign incident, and one which confirmed for the Rooneys that demonic influences were at work, involved the prayers to Michael the Archangel, which Stephanie had placed in 5 separate rooms. Hide, Declan mused. Maybe the two wee girls are playing hide-and-go-seek together. And maybe I'm going out of my mind, Declan, said a distraught Stephanie. Mysterious symbols appeared one day on the walls of the living room, kitchen, and hallway. Declan thought at once of runes or hieroglyphs, but the drawings were like nothing he had ever seen before, whether in books, magazines, or TV documentaries. Next we exorcise each room, in much the same way we would bless a house. Very often the blessing of a house and a service of the Eucharist will be enough, Canon Landrum adds, but there are those cases that demand more robust measures. The infestation of the Rooney household was one such case. When the Canon visited the house for the 3rd time, again accompanied by Alison and Florence, he was struck by the threatening atmosphere. I was not aware of it on the first 2 occasions, but I had the impression, and Florence confirmed it, that the child's spirit had been replaced, or to be more accurate, used by sinister forces to gain access to the house. He celebrated another Eucharist in the presence of the Rooney family. More prayers were said, the rooms were blessed a 3rd time. As before, the Canon and his party left Dungiven in the belief that whatever it was that had laid siege to the house had departed, never to return. We felt liberated then, says Stephanie. We felt that a door was shut. It was a door that had been opened by the restless spirit of a little lost girl named Sarah and used as a portal for evil to enter and disrupt the lives of an innocent young couple. Oh, we burned them a long time ago, Stephanie says. We see them from time to time in the shops, and most people would say they look pretty and smell nice. But Declan and me, whenever we see them, well, a shiver runs through us.